Hello and welcome. As folks are signing in, we'll get started in just a minute. In the meantime, I'm going to launch a poll here. Just let me know what percentage of native plants, trees, shrubs, the whole thing, do you currently have on your property? We will get started in just a minute too. Okay, good. Looks like it's 6:30. We've got some people in. I'm sure more people will be signing in. And we've got a 50-50 split almost of folks in, let's see, somewhere between 1 to 49% and somewhere between 50 to 99%. Okay. Oops. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Sarah Michehl. I am the Community Engagement Specialist with the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. I'm going to talk more about who we are, but tonight we are going to be talking all about shrubs for our home landscape, for our yards, and why that is so important. All right, so let's get started. Oh, you guys, this recording, it's going to be emailed to you either tonight or tomorrow. And feel free to reach out with me with questions anytime after this presentation. I'm going to give you my email address. Also, if you have questions tonight, put them in the Q&A box, please. And I will go through it at the very end. All right, so let's start a little bit here with who is the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. We are a nonprofit land trust located about an hour northwest of Chicago in Illinois. And what a land trust is we like to preserve and take care of land, as well as support the landowners who want to do the same thing. And we do that in a whole different variety of ways. Programs like this to kind of share knowledge, along with working with homeowners, landowners who want to maybe preserve their property forever with a conservation easement. We do a native plant, tree, shrub sale. It'll be opening on Monday, actually, online. We have a very active volunteer group that's out doing stewardship work. And we have preserved properties too that we have outright fundraised and have preserved forever. So there's just a lot of different ways that we work with our community and our natural areas here in the county. And this is exactly what all land trusts do. So even if you're not here, you know, in the Midwest, let's say you're somewhere else tonight, it's important that you find your land trust. And you can do that by literally going to a website called findalandtrust.org and type your zip code in and connect with them. Figure out how you can support them and they can support you. So become a member, volunteer, get their e-newsletter, follow them on social media, all different things. All right, so tonight, why do we even care about, we're gonna focus on shrubs tonight, but trees too. Why do we even care? Well, here in our area, and this is the same no matter where you go, unfortunately, but we have drastically lost a lot of our oak woodland coverage since settlement. So settlement here in Northern Illinois occurred, European settlement occurred here around mid 1830s. And that's when our landscapes really started to be drastically altered. And we lost a lot of oak coverage, and not just oaks, but our shrub layer as well. And we lost 87%. And like I said, this is data specifically for the county where I am, but it tells the story in a lot of different areas as well. Why do we care about this? There's a lot of benefits to native trees and shrubs, both in a natural setting and as well as in your yard. And you can see what I listed out there. Some of them are really, well, they're all important, but the sequestering of carbon, the creation of oxygen, the stabilization of soil, the wildlife support, huge. Okay, so what these trees and shrubs do for us is amazing, and for wildlife too. And we're going to go through that as we go through here. So a lot of them have been replaced by non-native invasive trees and shrubs. So what does this term native and non-native mean? So a native tree, shrub, plant, what that means is it has grown in a certain area for thousands of years without human intervention. It has developed relationships with the insects, with the plants, with the soil, with everything around it. When you introduce plants from different regions of the globe into a certain ecosystem, they don't have those developed relationships, and they're going to throw the balance off a little bit. And we see that with things like buckthorn here. Oh, and before I go on, if you want to check the native range of any tree, shrub, plant, whatever it is, there's a great website called BONAP, BONAP.org, that allows you to check the native range down to the county level of any tree, shrub, or plant in North America. It's huge. All right, so buckthorn. This is a great example of a non-native invasive shrub / tree, native to Europe, Asia, other areas. And when it was originally brought here in the late 1800s, here in where I am in the Chicago area, it was brought here to provide privacy on some estates north of Chicago. And birds would eat the berries, and it escaped and went crazy as these birds were kind of, spreading it all around. There were no biological controls on its population. So this is one that we see taking over in our oak woodland understory, as well as basically all kinds of unmowed areas, as well as all the different honeysuckles, the Japanese honeysuckles that are non-native, same story. The burning bushes as well, which are unfortunately a hugely popular landscaping shrub. Super invasive, you guys. There's a park near me, and it borders a neighborhood where the name of a street is literally Burning Bush Trail. And the developers put in like 1 million burning bushes, and everybody has them in their yard. And there's so much burning bush invading this really high quality natural area next to it. It's really unfortunate. We're going to talk about some replacements tonight, though. Don't worry. Things like Japanese barberry too, huge invasive. Okay, those nasty thorns on it. All right, so to get started on how we're going to replace some of these things in our yard, and I don't care how big or small your yard is, there's ways for you to incorporate these things. It's important that you develop a plan, all right, that you have a plan of what you're going to do. Think about your growth, like how big of a tree or shrub are you able to accommodate? How much light is the area going to get, and what is the soil? Is it super dry? Is it like really sandy and gravelly? Is it a medium loamy kind of black soil, or is it really moist and wet at certain times of the year? Or maybe it alternates. Sometimes it's wet, sometimes it's dry. So there's going to be trees and shrubs for all of these situations. So common mistake, trees or shrubs planted too close together or too close to a structure. I see this all the time. I've done it too. You plant a tree or shrub and you don't like take into account when it says the maximum growth, you don't take that into account. So think about that, all right? And think about overhead utilities and or below ground utilities, and don't plant trees and shrubs over those. Don't plant trees or shrubs over septic fields as well. I don't remember the exact number. I think it's 25 feet that you want to stay away from septic fields. Trees and shrubs can create some havoc in those areas. You don't want to do that. Don't let trees grow out of your foundation. I know it's hard because squirrels like to plant walnuts and whatever in the soil right up along your foundation. Don't let that happen. That can damage your foundation. It's not good for the tree either. Okay. So here's some like dimension kind of suggestions. I like the ones that are like the minimum spacing from the wall of a building or the corner of a building. Those are good kind of numbers to pay attention to. All right, so let's talk now about the shrubs. So we're gonna go from big to small, and then we're going to talk about some ground cover options below them as well, because that's basically one of my favorite topics. All right, so pagoda dogwoods, and everything that I'm going to cover tonight is definitely native in the Great Lakes region, but I highly suggest before you go out and buy any of these that you check their native range on that bonap.org website that I suggested and make sure that it works for you. Okay, so pagoda dogwood, this is it can be a small single trunked tree, or it can also be a multi-trunked shrub, depending. This is one, I love this one. If you've got kind of a moist, shaded area, it doesn't have to be super moist, at least kind of medium soil. A shaded area, so you definitely want some protection from like the harsh southwest baking down sun in the afternoon. So if it's got protection from that and you've got room for something that can get up to like 25 to 30 feet tall, this is a gorgeous one to put in. That it's in the dogwood family, and it gets this really interesting pagoda shaped structure to it. You can see how there's tiers almost of branching as it goes up, and wonderful panicles of white flowers in the early summer that are just absolutely beautiful. This is a great one to soften like the edges and the corners of a house. If you've got the protection from the sun, this is a nice one to do that with. Or it could be used as a specimen tree. When I say specimen tree or shrub, I mean that it's just planted by itself. It's not incorporated into a hedgerow or mixed in with other stuff. It's like featured, it's a specimen. Or anywhere in your woods, in the edge of your woods, inside a wooded area, or a small bird garden or something like that. This is one that can tolerate some clay, which is really nice. Not surprised to hear that, since I find it in moist woodlands a lot, and sometimes there's going to be a clay component to those soils. This is what it looks like in the winter. One of the people I know through our Conservation at Home program, which I'm going to talk more about, Dorothy Robbins, she sent me this picture of her pagoda dogwood in the winter, and it's right outside the front of her house, and she loves it so much that she decorates it with little ornaments, and I think that's really cool. So you could see a close-up of what the flowers look like, and then these berries, the little fruits, loved by birds. Okay, they're just really high in lipids, and the berries are going to form in late summer when a lot of birds are just stocking up for either winter or their migration. So this is a great addition if you want to be attracting those birds. Okay, another one, and this is one of my most recommended shrubs for people because it can handle a wide variety of conditions. It's not going to be happy in standing water, but medium soil, dry soil, it could do sun, it can do shade, serviceberry. So if you have space for this, it's going to get up to 25 feet tall, potentially 15 feet wide. If you have space for this, this is a stunning addition, especially in the spring. I'm obsessed with mine like all the time. I have one right outside my house that especially right now when the buds are just popping out and they're like fuzzy and I just am looking at them all the time. Anyway, huge host plant for so many different pollinators in the Midwest. That means that these butterflies and moths, there's a ton of them that will lay their eggs in the leaves of this shrub. And then when the caterpillars hatch out, they're able to eat the leaves. They have a specialized relationship with the amelanchiers, okay, or the serviceberries. The nectar and pollen from these gorgeous flowers too, which is in the springtime, awesome, loved by insects as well. And the berries, I'm going to show you a next one too. The berries are loved by all kinds of birds. All right, so this is another one that can either be a total specimen shrub, like featured, or can anchor, on the corner of a house or a garden or something. And it's also gorgeous, just like in a mixed hedgerow too. So it gets great fall color. The more sun it gets, the nicer the yellow fall color is. And then it's going to attract so many different kinds of birds that absolutely love these berries. That's a cedar waxwing there. And here's an example of one of the insects that just loves, that will use this to lay its little eggs on, which will hatch into a caterpillar that looks like that. And the caterpillar is then able to eat those leaves. A lot of times people don't necessarily associate shrubs with pollinator supporters, and they absolutely are. It's not just birds that these shrubs are supporting. And that's why when you think about, when I showed you that map in the beginning, where we've lost 87% of our oak woodlands, that's not just oak trees that we've lost. It's the entire understory shrub layer as well. And the diversity of shrubs that we would have had in all the different habitats is gone. And so we need to start thinking about replacing that and putting these things in our yards. Oh my gosh, witch hazel. Okay, love this. The structure of this is beautiful, even when there's no leaves on it. And I'm going to show you a picture of one in the winter in just a minute. Okay, so really slow growing, good as a specimen shrub, as an understory tree in your woods, mixed into a hedge, like all different things. This one's going to be good for, personally, for me, I don't have this one in my yard yet, but I'm going to, and I'm planting it as a specimen. Like I want this thing highlighted. Pretty tall, pretty wide, good for part sun to shade. I don't think it would do okay with like 12 hours of blaring sun. This is one that would be found in a little bit more shady of areas out in nature. Can do really dry soil, can do medium, loamy, kind of normal blacktop soil as well. Here's the structure of it in the winter. This is somebody that I know who lives like 5 minutes from me, and he let me come take a picture of this. I think like when you're standing in front of it, it's so wide branching and it's just a beautiful structure. I had to stop and just like stare at it. It was so interesting looking. This is a really neat one too, because it blooms here in the Great Lakes region. It's gonna bloom late fall. So it's like our very latest blooming shrub, and it's got those crazy, like spindly looking flower blossoms to it. All right, so Black Haw viburnum. This is a viburnum, and I'm going to touch on a couple different viburnums tonight. This is one that's pretty adaptable. It's going to do sun, shade, any soil condition from dry to wet. So this one can basically do it all. It is going to form potentially thickets. So all the shrubs that I've talked about so far are not going to necessarily spread by forming underground kind of suckers. They're not going to do that. They're not going to aggressively potentially spread. This is one that might. Some people are like, no, it doesn't. And then a lot of people I've talked to, yes, it spreads by suckering. And from what I've read, that's the normal condition for this shrub, is to do that. So because of that, if you've got a tiny small garden, and you want a ton of other plants in there, don't put this in because it's just going to spread and sucker all over the place around it. All right. But in some situations, that's like a really big advantage. If you're like, I need something that's just going to take up a large amount of space in a relatively quick time, here you go. This is a good option for that. And it's got beautiful fall or beautiful flowers on it. All of these shrubs, generally, the more sun they get, the more flowers they're going to get. Okay. And like the more brilliant their fall foliage will be, and the fuller like the shrub is going to grow. It's not going to be super spindly and kind of reaching for the light. Okay. Loved by berries, loved by whatever, all different kinds of insects. Great for hedgerows, putting it in your like edge of your woods, especially if you need privacy. This is a good one to put in. 9 bark. All right, so this is multiple 9 barks that are pretty old. I'm guessing this is 3 of them that are just kind of grouped together. Beautiful arching, kind of rainbow arching habit. Give it space. It's going to be at least 12 feet tall, and 15 feet wide is pretty fair. And all right, so I've made this mistake with 9 bark with planting them too close together, planting them like say 6 feet apart. That's not enough. All right, I should have done at least 10 feet apart, because the graceful like arching structure is lost when they're kind of shoved in together. So I think this one is really beautiful and nice when you let it have its space and kind of arch. Again, you know, summer blooms lead to these really interesting seed capsules, which the more sun it gets, the brighter pink those seed capsules are. All right. And when all of these shrubs that I'm talking about tonight, there's like a million different garden variety, like cultivar versions of these shrubs. So like, yeah, you can probably walk into Home Depot and buy some kind of 9 bark, like 9 bark Diablo or whatever, something. You're able to walk into a big box store and buy that. So just know that that's not the straight native version. That's not like what would be found out in nature. Some people care about that. Some people don't. It's really up to you to decide. Personally, on my own property, I try to stick with 100% straight native species whenever I can. I don't want the colors of the leaves messed around with. Like, I want it to look like what it would be in nature. There are certain conditions that have been changed on certain plants that could potentially affect the way pollinators use them. They're doing research on this right now to determine, you know, exactly what that is. All right. So anyway, I love the way these seed capsules look after the flowers kind of, you know, go away. It's really nice and gives you interesting multi-season views, basically. So you see those seed capsules hanging all through the winter, along with interesting bark that you really get to see in the winter. As you can see on the left there, it's got this like stripy, almost exfoliating bark, along with really nice fall color if it's got a bunch of sun. Okay. I was just blown away by the fall color. It looked really cool. Okay, so now we've got this viburnum trilobum. This guy here is not a true cranberry. All right, I'm going to talk more about this. Is a controversial shrub, gorgeous. And the reason it's controversial is because it often gets confused with its European cousin. And so sometimes it's mistakenly planted or mistakenly sold, thinking that it's the American version and it's the European version. All right. So anyway, gorgeous viburnum, can use great for like mixing up in a hedge or on the edge of the woods, or it could be potentially used as a specimen shrub too. This one gets these absolutely brilliantly red fruits that dangle down. I was driving down the road. You could see in the picture with those red berry things there, the road in the background. So I'm driving down that road and I look over and it's my friend's property and I'm like, whoa, what are those? You know, so I call him up. I'm like, I need to stop over and take a picture of that. So you're driving by at 45 miles per hour and these are so brilliant red. You can see these berries. It's very eye-catching. So those are great, you know, for multi-season interest, even in the winter. All right, so let's talk about how you identify the difference between the European high bush cranberry and the American native version. So we can see the leaf difference is one way that we can tell. The viburnum trilobum on the right, the European one on the left. They can hybridize. So just keep this in mind. And that European one, tons of my neighbors have that planted in their landscaping. It's super invasive. When I first moved into my property, pulled so much of that out of my woods. It was that and burning bush and buckthorn and honeysuckle and blah, 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 blah. So yes, the European one is absolutely invasive. All right, so the leaf difference is one difference, but as we all know, there's only leaves on it for a certain number of years or time of the year. So it's important to also be able to ID it when there's no leaves, but also on the leaf, that's right. With this one, you have to have the leaf to be able to ID it. All right. So, and this is really complicated and it took me a long time to be able to find this, but there's these little glands at the base of the leaf. And on the European one, the gland is flat. If you look on the left there, up on the top where it says flat top, concave shape to the glands, those are flat. The glands on the American one are going to be convex or kind of mounded up. All right. This is tricky to find. If you see the leaf, you're generally able to tell the difference, but once they start getting hybridized, it's hard. It's hard. So you can see why this is a tricky shrub and why it can be controversial, okay, with this one. All right, so hazelnut. I think that like everywhere that hazelnut is native, people should have this in their people should have this in their yard. So this would have been the most prolific understory shrub in this area. before settlement. So hazelnuts would have been in the woods. They would have been out in the prairies. Like it was the #1 understory shrub. And it's also a host plant for lots of different butterflies and moths. People don't think about that, all right, with something like a hazelnut that doesn't get a huge showy flower on it. So really high wildlife value because it gets hazelnuts on it as well. And it's great for hedgerows or thickets, and then just dotted anywhere throughout like a wooded setting as well. I have this in both formal landscaping up around my house, as well as in a kind of wilder back wooded area. It's going to spread. It's a thicket former, so it's going to be spreading like multiple trunks, not super quickly and not aggressively at all. It can do full sun, it can do shade, do dry, it can do moist soil, but it's going to be happiest in like dry to medium. This is where you get these really cool flowers, and it's going to be any day around here where I am. If you go further south from where I am in the Chicago area, anywhere further south, this is probably already starting. These little tiny red flowers start to form, as well as, and you can see in that picture on the bottom right, that's how tiny those little red flowers are. The catkins dangle down, and around this time of the year in March is when those catkins start to swell, and eventually they're going to, when you flick them or the sun, the wind hits them, they're going to release pollen, and that pollen is going to be windborne, and then other hazelnuts with their little flowers open are going to grab onto that pollen. And then if pollination occurs, that's how you're going to get the formation of the nut, which is what you could see in the upper right corner there. The nuts, yeah, you can eat them. It's really cool, but you got to get them. I mean, the squirrels get my hazelnuts in like August before they're ripe at all. They're just green like that. They're green, and then the squirrels take them. So some people harvest them early when they're still green and spread them out on like tarps in the sun where they can keep it away from the squirrels though, and they let them ripen that way. And they get gorgeous fall color if they're in the sun. If it's not in the sun, it's more muted of the color. But for me, so these are younger. These aren't full grown by any means. This is like, I don't know, those were maybe like 3 or 4 years old. Taller than me. They're probably 6 feet tall in this picture. They get a really nice full kind of shape to them when they're in the full sun too. I've got some that are in shade that are way more spindly, which makes sense if you think about it, because there's more energy going into growth towards the light than necessarily, you know, being more compact. But when I see all of these burning bushes planted in people's landscaping, like, man, everybody should just put in a hazelnut, you know, gorgeous fall color like this. So I don't know. This is a great alternative to all those burning bushes that everybody's putting in. All right, so elderberry. This is a great one. This is one that can do like a million different growing conditions. Full sun, shade, dry, wet, like it can, I find it all over the place. It's not super particular to one kind of habitat, and that makes it great for home landscaping. It is a prolific thicket former, so it's going to spread by suckers. So again, if you've got a small garden, don't put this in there. Or you've got like any space where you don't want these suckers just kind of all over the place, don't put this in. If you've got a situation where you want a thicket, you want some kind of privacy, this is a great one to incorporate in there. Okay. So hedgerow thicket, great flowers, these really cool, like as big as my hand shaped flowers in June. And then they get gorgeous clusters of berries in late summer. that people squeeze and they make them into juice and all kinds of other things. Birds love them. All right, spice bush. This is one that's going to be happiest in part sun to shade. So out in nature, you would find this Lindera growing along like shaded river banks and stream banks, and you'd find it down kind of in these wet areas. This one in particular isn't native to McHenry County where I am. It's native maybe like one county south. So, you know, you've got to figure out how close you want to stay. Personally, I'm fine with this one being in my yard. Really nice fall color. I've got it in an area where it gets maybe, I don't know, 5 hours of sun a day, and it does fine. It does really good. Nice as a specimen planting or mixed into a hedge. Okay. Don't put this one in dry soil. Like I said, it's going to be happiest. I mean, you'd find it in nature out in these wet areas. So it can do medium soil to wet soil. And it gets these really nice little berries on them, which are full of lipids and these beautiful yellow flowers around mid-April. All right, so let's talk about this term dioecious and what that means. So you need a female shrub and a male shrub to be able to have proper pollination occur and the berries to be produced. How do you know if you've got a female or male shrub when you're standing at the nursery? You can't tell when they're young and in like a 3-gallon little pot or something. You can't tell that. So we just recommend to people to, like, you know, buy multiple shrubs, buy like 3 of them or 6 of them or something, and you're bound to get some separate genders in there. Okay. All right, so winterberry, this is another one that likes it more towards the moist side. This is going to be a good one to mass, okay? Like mass it all together. Some of these shrubs that are kind of leggy and have just like sparse growth habit look nicer when there's a bunch of them, like all kind of, you know, massed together. Beautiful winter interest because of the berries. And let's see, this is another dioecious one. So just get several of them to make sure that you'll actually get these berries. Okay. Don't plant, just this whole like supplemental watering thing. Don't plant it in dry soil. Put something else in that'll be happy in dry soil, like the serviceberry or something. Okay, coralberry. This one is super interesting. So this one's native a little bit further south from where I am, but will still be fine up here. Extremely interesting because this is a small shrub, okay, so under 5 feet tall, that can handle dry shade. And there's not a lot of shrubs that are going to be under 5 feet that can handle dry shade. And that's a situation that is often found in home landscaping, okay, a dry shade situation. So this is a thicket former, so it's going to just be spreading out, all right, with those little rhizomes spreading out all over the place. Beautiful arching habit. And obviously the fruits are like the star, you know, that's when it's going to be at its best, is in the fall and winter. So that's kind of neat, you know, when you think about that. Oh, great for erosion control. Any of these like sucker thicket forming shrubs are going to be amazing to control erosion on sloped areas. They're going to hold the soil in place. And here's what it looks like when it's just kind of a big thicket, you know, it just kind of arches and goes all over the place. So it's not necessarily super neat and formal looking, but still nice. You know, it's still got this mounded form. And why it really works in this picture is because of the structure and straightness of the bench, as you can see there, like this, and the concrete, like all of it provides a lot of structure. And so then it works with this like loosely, you know, more natural kind of shrub in the background. All right, dwarf bush honeysuckle. If you've been to my webinars before, you've probably heard me talk about this one because I'm obsessed with it and I love it. So this is my yard here. It's going to spread by suckers, which for me here is a foundation planting. This used to be a whole row of burning bush. I had a big area that needed to be covered. And so this shrub was able to do that. I let it sucker. It goes right up, it suckers into the grass. And you know what? When we mow the lawn, the suckers get mowed right down. And so it doesn't even matter. It's very easy to control that way. But again, if you've got a garden where you want a ton of other different kinds of plants growing, don't put this in there because you're just going to be fighting with the suckers. I love it as a foundation planting. It can do full sun, it can do shade, it can do dry soil, it can do medium soil. It's not going to be happy in really wet situations. Where you find this in nature is out in dry, rocky woods, like open woods. That's where you're going to find this in nature. Okay. It looks best when it's massed together. So you see how there's 3 different groupings of this shrub. That's actually 3 individual shrubs in each grouping. So this is 9 of them. This one looks spindly and bad when it's just one shrub. You need a bunch of them massed together, okay, for it to look its best. It gets these interesting little yellow flowers on it in the summer. It's not showy, like these flowers are not crazy huge and showy like some of the viburnums and the 9-bark and stuff. It's not, but it's still loved by the pollinators. Okay, bumblebees are all over this thing and they absolutely love it. Okay, so another native shrub that we have here is called New Jersey tea. Now, this is going to be probably the shortest of the native shrubs in this area where I am in the Great Lakes, Southern Great Lakes. I know if you go further north, there's more shorter shrubs. But New Jersey tea, I love this and I hate this one because it's very fickle. Where you're going to find it in nature a lot of times is out in like some really dry, open places. Could be an open prairie, could be an open savanna. And it's going to be happiest in full sun, but it can do part sun too. And here's the thing, rabbits love it. And rabbits are going to want to gnaw around the base of it a lot. And sometimes that'll kill that shrub back for the year. And then it looks like nothing, just looks like dead sticks. And then the next year, it might randomly resprout. You just don't know. So, and this has happened to me this has happened to me over the last 9 years in this particular garden. And I know it's happened to like other people too that I've talked to. So what I tell people to do is don't plant it in a place where it's like the major focal point, where it's like necessary. If it's not blooming, it's going to leave this giant gaping spot in your garden. So what I do with it now is I just kind of dot it in between a bunch of densely planted like other plants that aren't super aggressive, things like prairie dropseed and butterfly weed and some other kind of well-behaved prairie plants. And if it doesn't grow that year, oh well. If it does, awesome, because it's gorgeous. And let me tell you, those little white blooms there are very foamy looking, and they're eye-catching from the street. You see this and it's beautiful. And around the 4th of July or so, end of June, beginning of July, they're absolutely covered in pollinators. I can't even tell you what they are. They're everything from tiny little gnats to flies to wasps to bees to beetles and everything in between. It's absolutely covered in all of them, and it's pretty cool to see. Okay. All right. And it's short, and it's not going to like aggressively spread anywhere, which is nice. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about care. And this goes for trees too, the stuff that I'm going to talk about. So avoid the volcano mulch situation. And unfortunately, we still see this happening. So volcano mulch is just when you plant a tree or shrub and there's like this giant mound of mulch up around it. And it's like suffocating the bark of the tree or shrub. We don't want to do that. It just traps moisture up against it. There's no oxygen flow that can happen because oxygen does flow in and out of these, the bark on the tree or the shrub. So we don't want that. We don't want disease and decay and that kind of stuff. So instead of actual wood mulch, we encourage people to use plants as a living mulch. So plants such as wild strawberry. Now, this is going to mainly apply to shrubs that are not big thicket formers, right? Like the elderberry, the black haw viburnum, the dwarf bush honeysuckle, the ones where I told you they spread by suckers. Those are generally going to spread out and they're going to fill empty space. So they don't necessarily need a ton of mulch and stuff underneath them. But the other shrubs that don't do that, the things like, the service berries, that they will form multiple trunks, but they're not spreading by these underground suckers. So anyway, all the other ones, it is good to have this living mulch underneath them. So wild strawberry looks beautiful in the summer. It looks beautiful in the fall. It looks beautiful in the spring when it gets the little white flowers on it and cool little berries. It stays really short, so it's under a foot. This is one of my favorite ground covers. Like, I can't even talk about this enough. It greens up in early spring. Like right now, when I obsessively stare at my strawberry in the middle of March, it is starting to plump up and green up. So it's also like evergreen. It's there all through the winter too. So this is a really important one that's going to be holding moisture in, which is really nice. So you don't have to buy wood mulch. Just get some of these plants in, which is really nice. And we are selling strawberry in our native plant sale this year too. Violets are another really great ground cover that's short, pollinator supporters. So is that strawberry. All right, you're getting double duty with these plants. I mean, mulch isn't really doing that. The plants are supporting pollinators, so are your shrubs. So you really got a good, you got double duty happening there. So violets, shade, sun, whatever, they can do all of it. It doesn't matter. They're not going to suppress the growth of other plants. And then sedges. All right, so this is just one kind of sedge. There's basically a sedge for every habitat, no matter where you live in North America. So things in the carex family. Pennsylvania sedge is one of my favorites for home landscaping. It's got a huge native range. Okay, so just look that one up. Carex pennsylvanica. It's under a foot. It's got this beautiful mounding habit to it, which makes it very appropriate for even formal landscapes, formal gardens. It spreads slowly by little rhizomes. I wish it spread faster. And it's supposed to deter rabbits. So this is a place here in this picture. This is me doing a random experiment from something I read in a book. You can see I've got that New Jersey tea down there in the corner. And then I put a bunch of Pennsylvania sedge around it because apparently rabbits, deer, these herbivorous mammals, they don't like to put their face down inside these big patches of sedges because they do kind of have rough, sharp edges to them. Is this, is this like hard data? No, I'm doing it as an experiment, but I can tell you in the last 3 years, these New Jersey teas are doing fine and they've had no rabbit predation. I've yet to go out and look at them yet to see though, because usually the rabbit predation happens, like the gnawing and stuff, a lot of it happens over the winter. So we'll see, who knows, whatever, it looks beautiful either way. And this is what it looks like now. Okay, so like mid-March to early April, the Pennsylvania sedge just has a nice, even the like dead, grass parts, the blade parts of it, they really have a nice kind of flowing form to them. This is an oak tree in a very traditional suburban neighborhood that's on a slope, and the lawn grass just wouldn't grow around this oak tree. And I see this so much where the grass just won't grow around the trees for whatever reason. Maybe it's too dry, maybe it's too shady, who knows. So the homeowner had the grass killed around this, and it's a very nice, neat, just circle bed around the oak, fully planted in Pennsylvania sedge. And now they don't have to mow that, which is it's a steep slope. So it's very nice that they don't have to mow that. And there is a nutrient exchange system happening between the native Pennsylvania sedge and that oak tree. They've lived together for thousands of years. They support each other. Okay, that's the beauty of planting these native plants with these native trees and shrubs. When you can, they help each other. The wood mulch isn't doing that. Okay, wood mulch isn't forming this connection with bacteria and fungus and everything else and exchanging nutrients. It's not doing that. These plants will do that. Okay, and that's amazing to me. And all these little plantings can be used as a nursery, and you can move them to other parts of your property too. Okay, you can like separate and transplant them. All right, so we recommend when you plant a tree or a shrub that it's not so much about how deep you dig it, it's about how wide you dig it. And we recommend, this is 2 to 5, I'd say 3 to 5 times the size of the root ball. Okay, that's how far you dig out from the sides, and just loosen up that soil. Okay, because a lot of times those roots aren't necessarily going to go straight down, they're going to grow laterally. And then just, put it in, firm up that soil to prevent it from kind of sinking down. The top of the tree or shrub, you want just even with the soil level after it's been just kind of firmed down a little bit. And then so you don't have to rototill around it. Don't rototill anything. Just kind of dig it up a little bit with a shovel. We recommend watering, especially if you're doing a spring planting. Okay, water, I'd say at least 1 to 2 times a week for the first few weeks, if you can, and water deeply. So don't just stand there with the hose and like spray it. It's best if you can have some kind of like dripping, soaking action happening where the hose is literally just laying on the ground. But even if you've got like a drip hose around it on the ground, and you just let it soak in for an hour or so. So if you're able to do that, great. I can tell you, I shouldn't tell you. There's times though where I've done plantings way in the back of my property on the other side of a creek where I'm not able to get water to it, and they do fine. So it all depends on the weather, it depends on the hardiness of the shrub. But if you're going to do everything right, this is how you should do it. And cage them. Oh, this is so important when they're new. So it's going to vary in how long you need to do it by just how much deer and rabbit pressure you have. But man, if you don't cage your new trees and shrubs for at least the first few years, they can just become like a buffet, especially if they're out in the open in like a grass area like this. If they're just out in the open, then it's very easy pickings for these animals, especially over the winter, to come through and just eat them. All right. So we recommend to cage them if you can. And then after they're big enough, usually after like 3 years or so, 4 years, I take the cages off. All right. So one program that we have that is a regional program around, well, it's in multiple states now. It started here in Illinois by the Conservation Foundation, and it's spread now to other counties, but it's called Conservation at Home. And this is basically like, hey, you got some native plants, you got some, native trees, shrubs, things like that. Cool. Call us up. We'll give you a sign for your yard. We'll come. We'll do a site visit for you. Or you don't have anything. You got nothing yet. You've just got like a bunch of invasive stuff in your yard, but you want to change it. Call us up. We'll come. We'll do a site visit for you, and we'll help guide you, okay, in how to make that change. And then when you make that change, or you start to make that change, we'll give you a yard sign, okay? So basically it's native plants in, invasive stuff out. And there's a million different benefits that this is going to have on pollinators, on, absorbing stormwater, on less chemical usage, like all these things. It's amazing, the ripple effects. All right. And then the yard sign is kind of just like a neat little thing, because it's a nice way to talk to your neighbors, about what you're doing. It's a nice little sign that kind of has a very brief little explanation of the benefits of native plants, trees, and shrubs. So if you wanted to schedule a site visit, well, if you're here in McHenry County, you just email me. If you're somewhere else and you want to know if this program exists, just email me and I'll help point you in the direction that you should go. Okay. And there's programs like this all across the country, not just here in the Chicago area. The Wild Ones group is a nonprofit that's nationwide, and their whole goal is supporting landowners who want to do stuff with native plants. So I would suggest you find your local Wild Ones group as well, and your local land trust. So remember that website I told you, findalandtrust.org. Okay, so here are some different resources in Northern Illinois. If you need to buy some native trees or shrubs, there's some places that you could buy from. Those are all, including us, those are all supporting a nonprofit. So there's us, there's Friends of Bolo Bog. Bolo Bog is a state-owned natural area, and there's like a nonprofit friends group associated with it. Citizens for Conservation, they also have a tree and shrub sale going on too. And then there's mail order options. There's books that I recommend to learn about these different invasive plants as well as the native trees and shrubs. That Alan Branhagen book is great. It's not just shrubs, it's also plants too. But he does a good job of talking about how these shrubs behave in the whole landscape, which is nice, because when you take some of these things out of nature and you put them in kind of a pampered home landscaping setting, and they don't have a lot of competition, they can go a little bit bonkers sometimes. So it's nice to know that and to anticipate that and how to deal with it. And then there's a bunch of other things here. People always ask me about like pruning and stuff like that. You don't ever have to prune anything if you don't want to. It's purely a personal choice. What I'll do around here well, this will apply to anywhere where the shrub is native to Illinois. I will Google, like, let's say if I want to know about how do I trim, like when's the right time to prune, whether it's my 9 bark or whatever, like let's say I want to prune it, I'll start with Morton Arboretum. So I'll Google, 9 bark and then Morton. And then that's going to bring up a search result from Morton Arboretum. They've got a lot of good information about how some of these behave in a home landscape setting and how to care for them. And then different, social media things on there, like the Learn Facebook group, Landowner Ecology and Restoration Network. That's administered by us at the Land Conservancy. Anybody can join. It's a private Facebook group. We've got people from all over the country. And basically just post your questions or your observations on there, and knowledgeable landowners, botanists, restoration ecologists are going to jump on and give you their experiences and their thoughts in the matter. There's been some lively discussions like yesterday about the weed wrench type tool. So anyway, there's some good stuff on there. Check out all that kind of stuff as well. All right, I'm going to go to the Q&A box and see what kind of questions we have. Terry. Oh, hi, Terry. So if you already have wood mulch under trees, can you take the mulch out and put plants in? Yeah, absolutely. You can do that. And you don't even necessarily have to remove all the mulch, because over time that mulch is going to break down, over say 3 years or so, depending on how thick it is. But what you can do if you don't want to take all the mulch out is you can just remove enough mulch to be able to put the little perennial plant in there, the little violet or the little strawberry. Keep the surrounding mulch away from touching the plant. But you can just do it that too if you've got a huge amount of mulch that wouldn't work for you to be able to remove all of it. Okay. All right. So here's another question. Planted some small elderberries. I think I may have planted them too close. Will it hurt to transplant them this spring? Probably not. Elderberry's pretty sturdy. Here's the thing about elderberry, if you planted them pretty close together, they're just going to all mass together. Visually, that's what you're going to see. And it's not necessarily always a bad thing. That's a plant that shrub can really handle some competition. So if you're okay with that, with them just visually all blending together into one mass, then I would leave it. I would leave them. But if you don't want that, if you want them more as separate individuals, then yeah, go ahead and move them. And I would move them soon. I don't know where you are, Natalie, but here where I am in the Chicago area, the soil is currently workable. I can dig down into the soil right now. So I would be able to move and transplant things right now. That's absolutely okay to do that. And then just water it pretty good after you move it. And they'll probably be fine. Okay. All right. So with that, see, you're welcome. All the questions that we have. If you think of any other questions you have, just email me, post them on that Learn Facebook group. You'll be sent this recording tonight or tomorrow at some point. And I hope everybody has a good night and that you are inspired to put back our understory, put back these trees and shrubs in our property. Thank you so much for joining me, and everybody have a good night. Thanks. Bye.